So good afternoon, everyone, and welcome this afternoon. It's a great pleasure to chair this session, and it's an even greater pleasure, I think, to anticipate our next meeting when we can greet each other in person, but we have a wonderful afternoon ahead. Our first speaker, Mary Beard, was elected to the Society as an international member in 2012, and she is a world-renowned classicist and professor at the University of Cambridge, where she's taught since 1984. In addition to her teaching, Dr. Beard is the classics editor of the Times Literary Supplement and writes an often provocative blog, A Don's Life, a selection of which has been published. Her research interests include Roman history, especially social, cultural, and religious history, classics in Victorian and contemporary culture, museology, reception, and public engagement with classics. She's written numerous books on the ancient world, including Laughter in Ancient Rome, on joking, tickling, and cracking up, and the 2008 Wolfson Prize winner, Pompeii, The Life of a Roman Town, which provides a vivid account of life in Pompeii in all of its aspects, from food to sex to politics. Mary Beard has received many honors. She was elected a fellow by the British Academy in 2010 and became a foreign honorary member of the American Academy of Arts and Sciences in 2011. She was made an officer of the Order of the British Empire in the 2013 New Year honors, and perhaps most remarkably, a Dame Commander of the Order of the British Empire in the 2018 birthday honors for services to the study of classical civilizations. And I wonder if this is in fact a first. I cannot imagine too many others deserving this award. I also cannot fail to comment on the fact that Mary and I are both Unamites, proud members of a Cambridge Women's College. In 2011, I had the pleasure of introducing Mary Beard as Mellon Lecturer at the National Gallery of Art. Her spellbinding lectures on the imagery of the Caesars were published as 12 Caesars, Images of Power from the Ancient World to the Modern, in October of this year. She's always enjoyed dismantling the mistaken constructs of others, and I especially look forward to her words now on the Romans of the Decadence. Mary, over to you.
Thank you very much. And I do want to say that giving the Mellon lectures a decade ago was one of the highlights of my life. And I have to say that the office I had in the National Gallery in DC, looking over the Capitol, was a kind of view to die for, which I can't imagine ever replicating. But still, thank you. And today I'm going to be focusing on just one image of one not very well known ancient Roman emperor, and mainly on one 19th century painting. Now, it is against the background of that project that started off with the Mellon Lectures in DC and the book that I've now just published, because it's exploring the images of Roman emperors, not solely in Roman art, but in the art since the Renaissance. And if you want to put it crudely, what I'm trying to do is make Roman emperors seem interesting again, because I think, let's face it, most of us, and I'm including me here, most of us just walk past lineups of elegant marble or painted Caesars when we see them. And I'm hoping to encourage people to spot them lurking in all kinds of very odd places, because I promise you, Roman emperors are everywhere in art since the 15th century. So I suppose I'm trying to turn what are now a bit, let's face it, the Cinderellas of the art museum into the princesses. My emperor for today is Vitellius, who reigned for a few months in 69 CE in the civil wars that followed the death of the Emperor Nero. Now, whatever the truth about Vitellius, he has gone down in history as an utter villain, a sadist, a man, to put it mildly, of loose morals, and he ended up lynched and thrown into the Tiber. He was also a notorious glutton, so much so, as anybody who works on pre-20th century literature will know, Vitellian was a common adjective up to 150 years ago for an overeater. Let's go to a Vitellian banquet was always a good sign you're going to push the boat out. Now, the portrait I'm going to be talking about is this. Jake, can we just put him on the screen? We're having a great screen sharing that I'm not going to have to do. The portrait that I'm going to be basing what I say on is this. It's an ancient bust discovered in the early 16th century near Rome and given to the Republic of Venice in 1523 by Cardinal Grimani, under whose auspices it had been excavated. When it was dug up, it was instantly recognized as Vitellius because of the double chin and because he appeared to match up with the coins of Vitellius, as you can see. Let's get rid of him now, Jake. You've seen him enough. And between the 16th and 19th century, the heyday of the modern popularity of Vitellius, this was probably the most famous image, not just of him, but of any Roman emperor ever. And it was replicated everywhere. And I'll be trying to think in a few cases why it got so far. Full disclosure here, there are technical details of that sculpture that make us now completely certain that it is not Vitellius at all, but an unknown Roman of a century later. The way the eyes are done, for example, a distinctive not of the 1st century CE. But that's not going to bother me today. I am thinking about that guy as Vitellius. So that's the emperor and his portrait. Jake, let's have the next slide. Because the painting I'm going to be talking about is this. It's a vast canvas by Thomas Couture, now in the Musée d'Orsay in Paris, although there is a smaller version, much smaller version, in the Fog in Harvard. It's called The Romans of the Decadence, which gives me my title today, or, actually The Orgy for short. And it was first exhibited in the Paris Salon of 1847, the year before the revolution that deposed King Louis Philippe and his July monarchy. It was enormously hyped in advance, and it remained a hit in all kinds of ways for decades. In the early years of the 20th century, even, an article in an American art magazine called for a reproduction of this painting to be displayed in every US high school because it was the greatest sermon in paint ever rendered. I think high school students in the US have had a lucky escape that didn't happen. Now, in the reviews of this painting, in the critiques of the Salon, there was no direct reference to the specific failings of the monarchy, but there were plenty of references to contemporary disparities of wealth and the excesses of elite lifestyle. Let's get rid of them for a bit. There's too many sprawling bodies here, Jake. Thank you. And one clever set of cartoons in a satirical magazine, Les Guêpes, the wasps in Paris, imagined the reactions of different salon visitors. And it humorously conjured up one imagined viewer lamenting the fact that the bourgeoisie had finished all the food at this banquet. Another points out that just the canvas on which Couture had painted his painting could itself have provided the material to clothe a poor family. But those kind of quips, those satirical quips apart, it has proved actually very tricky for people to pin down the exact classical references in this painting, or even to date the decadence at which we're looking. What's going on in general is clear enough. It's the end of an all-night party, the sun's just coming up, and the Roman banqueters are sprawling around in various states of undress, while surrounding them are statues of men from the city's glorious past and a few austere observers who were definitely not joining in the fun. The fairly obvious moral was underlined in the Salon catalogue by a quotation from the Roman satirist Juvenal. Crueler than war, it said, vice fell upon Rome and avenged the conquered world. So far, so good. But beyond that, things are a bit more elusive. Here we've got, thank you for the next slide, that's great. Because there's one nude figure that actually dominates. Oh, sorry, that was me, Jake. That's right. There's one nude figure dominating the scene behind, based on a statue in the Louvre, which was then identified as the early imperial prince Germanicus. Now, in contrast to the semi-nakedness of the partygoers below, Germanicus reminds us that there are indeed, in Roman terms, honourable ways of going without one's clothes. And the particular identification with Germanicus, right or wrong, and probably wrong, points us to a dashing and successful and popular member of the early imperial dynasty, quite unlike the hopeless pile of semi-naked banqueters below. And yet, even with this statue, things get a bit more complicated. For Germanicus, this popular prince, was also the father of the monstrous emperor Caligula. And in 19 CE, he became, it was said, the victim of poisoning on the orders of his uncle, the Emperor Tiberius. So honourable Germanicus may have been, but he also serves here as a hint that whatever the exact date of the decadence in this portrait, in this painting, the signs of corruption were inescapably present at almost the very beginning of the rule of the emperors. And that's where, let's have the next pic, Jake. That's where another character in the painting comes in. This time, it's one not of the austere observers, but one of the decadent banqueteers who has, I hope you spot, the distinctive features of the Grimani Vitellius. And he's so out of it, so half asleep, that he doesn't actually spot that there's a naked woman about a foot from his nose. Now, that image of Vitellius amongst the group of the revellers is rarely recognised now. But he certainly was recognised in 1847 when it was first shown. Critics referred darkly to the Vitellian excesses represented, and one poet even responded, ironically, I guess, to the canvas, with a poem addressed to Vitellius, "Glory to Vitellius Caesar alone." But what exactly was Vitellius doing here? Let's get rid of him for a couple of minutes. I think it would be missing the point to say that this was just a convenient Roman whose features Couture had borrowed for one of his characters. He might possibly be a clue to the date of the decadence. He might be understood to be the host of this orgy, as if it was in 69 CE. He might even be an elusive tribute to Veronese, whom Couture often claimed as his inspiration. Let's have a look at the next slide. For in Veronese's Last Supper, he also, hundreds of years before, had incorporated in the figure of the server at the front of the right-hand column, he had incorporated also the features of Vitellius. Let's have a look at the next slide, which is a detail of that, and you'll see the similarity. Here you've got, in Veronese's painting of the Last Supper, you have the monstrous Vitellius gazing directly across at Jesus, as if he was actually in the act. It's almost as if this is a conversion scene. And interestingly, the critics of the 1847 Salon didn't fail to spot that Couture's vast canvas was hanging in the place where, in the Louvre, where another Veronese mega picture hung, the wedding feast at Cana. So we've got Veronese in the background. But I think there are other implications here too. And I think we can get rid of Veronese now. And I think we can see that these features are actually doing a real job in the painting. Because anybody who knew the story of Vitellius and of his very nasty end, put on a hook and thrown into the Tiber, would see that this figure was a strong hint that this scene of debauchery and the lifestyle it conjured up was doomed. For those who spotted it, the face of the emperor, I think, was a visual guarantee that punishment here was inevitable. It's as if the Roman emperor, the image of the Roman emperor, is acting as an internal commentary on the scene. And that's just one lesson, I think, of what an emperor can add to a painting. But I want to end by pushing that point a tiny bit further, because it was not only this Vitellius who confronted visitors to the Salon of 1847. Let's have the next picture. Because another artist, even less well known, put him center stage. This is the now little known Georges Rouget, in a slightly disturbing study entitled Vitellius, Roman Emperor and Christians Released to the Wild Beasts. The emperor again is based on a slightly slimmer version of the Grimani, and he sits gazing ahead, lost in his own thoughts, with at his back the slightly anachronistic arena where you can very faintly make out victims facing the lions. And the martyrs or whatever next to him just add to the puzzlement. Now, some critics had fun at the Salon, reflecting that, unlike Couture, Rouget had managed to conjure up Roman vice in just 3 figures. He didn't need a whole orgy, although they remained a bit unclear about the dynamics of the scene. Nevertheless, it's a very far cry from the other controversial role that Vitellius played in the art of 1847. Because, let's get rid of Rouget, during the summer months of that year, 10 of France's most ambitious young artists spent several months painting the gory scene of Vitellius's murder. They were the lucky ones who had got through to the final round of the competition for the Prix de Rome, the Rome Prize, which gave the winner a generous bursary for a long-term artistic residence in Rome. In 1847, the committee described the scene they wanted the contestants to paint for the competition. It was Vitellius dragged out of his hiding place in Rome, his head forced up at sword point so he could be killed more easily, and then thrown into the river. Let's have the final picture. Here you have both the winning entry and some of the runners up. Grisly versions of the death of Vitellius, all of which are actually based on the Grimani Vitellius. Now, critics carped about the talents of these painters, but there was also some unease about the subject itself. There'd been bloody themes set for this competition before, but this was the first and only scene of imperial assassination. What kind of satisfaction can one derive from this, said one critic. My interest is more, and I think we can get rid of the nasty scene now, my interest is more how we account for this focus on Vitellius as the emperor of the moment, and the conjunction of his excess, his guilty conscience, and his murder. I think it would be naive to imagine, as I said before, that there was a direct connection between these Vitellian themes and contemporary dissatisfaction with King Louis Philippe. It's not what contemporary critics pointed to. But I think it would be equally naive to deny indirect links, at least. There are comments in the critiques of these paintings of people seeing people taking justice into their own hands, which must surely underlie contemporary politics. And it's hard for me not to wonder whether the 10 young painters locked away in their studios during the summer, working on their paintings of the lynching of a Roman emperor, saw no connection at all with the revolution brewing outside. In one case, we know they did. In a letter written the following year, the second prize winner complained of the anodyne theme set in the competition of 1848, just before the fall of the king. It was St. Peter in the house of Mary. How could it be, he asked in his letter, that under the monarchy they had set the agony of a tyrant, but came up with nothing comparable under what was soon to be the new republic? He at least had noticed the politics of representing Vitellius in 1847. Thank you.
Well, one question that occurred to me, I'm not sure I was planning to ask it, but I mean, looking at that iconic painting that teaches us so much about what people were assuming and projecting, I'm wondering if there's something else in Western art history that would carry the same freight. I don't know, the famous picture of Washington crossing the Delaware, or I don't know. Can you think of others where you could really derive a whole lecture from
I suspect that most people for most of the 21st century will be really surprised at deriving in 20 minutes talk from Thomas Couture, because we have, what's interesting, I think, is we have generally forgotten him. I mean, I think he does have a slightly an honored role in the fog, but I've been to the Musée d'Orsay and people just walk past this painting. And so I think that's what's interesting is not so much what you say, that is interesting about how you can get some meat out of these paintings, but how really we've forgotten to get meat out of them. And I think that the painting seems so obvious and so bland to us. It looks like the guy who said it should be in every American high school. And as soon as you look at it and you start to kind of go beneath the surface, you find, of course, one of the reasons it's so telling for us is you can't ever quite make sense of it. That's why I think the picture of Germanicus, the sculpture, is really interesting, because we can easily say that the guys who are sprawling around in the orgy, they must be baddies. But Germanicus, the upstanding guy, he gave birth to Caligula, or he fathered Caligula. So can you ever separate Roman grandeur from Roman decadence? That's why it's interesting. I think that you can't pin it down. I'm not sure about Washington and the Delaware.
No, but also it's a reminder that it requires the viewer to bring a fair amount of knowledge. People walk by it because they don't have a clue.
It requires work. And I think that, what I've been saying when I've been going around doing stuff about my book, this image of Vitellius, I've just given you 2 little pictures of him. He gets absolutely damn everywhere. And I've got to kind of, I hope that I don't live to have to come up with this, but I've said to people, look, if you go to a major Western art museum and you don't find a Vitellius in it, I'll buy the book back from you, because this is a kind of template for moral discussion that you did need to bring something to, but we have completely lost. I mean, I think it was as obvious in the 19th century as if, for example, and this is a crude example, but if we'd seen a picture like that and there was Barack Obama amongst the, it's as recognizable to them as that physiognomy. And I think it's fun to try to recapture that sense of a familiarity, even if it's a spoof physiognomy. Because it wasn't Vitellius, that's the joke. It never was Vitellius anyway.
Right. But it does put quite a burden on a curatorial staff to speak to 21st century people and
yes. How and I think we haven't kind of faced up to that, actually, without making it boring. It's you can make it very boring and say, oh, spot the Emperor Vitellius here, but so what? So what?
Yeah, because we want it to be, we need it to be, or we needed it to be at that time and place. Then a question is from John Deutsch, who says, I thank Professor Beard for a fascinating talk. Few can match it. With respect.
I think many can.
Oh, right.
But I think it's, what I'm trying to do is throw a part of a challenge down to try to get our, and I know many art historians, this is insulting to many art historians to apply, they don't do this. But I think that if you come to paintings like this, not with an art historical eye, but with a classical eye, and you're saying, hey, look, I know about Vitellius, I've read Vitellius. You see different things.
We are having a few technical difficulties. The question is, can you rank the emperors for perceived decadence in 1948? Nero, Caligula, Vitellius.
I think the Vitellius comes top. My suspicion it would go in reverse order to what you say, Vitellius, Caligula, Nero. But I think there is, I think that another of the kind of the fun engagements with these emperors and with decadence is actually saying, so who's the worst? And, you get a series of 12 Roman emperors, done earlier than this, and they will have left out, say, Domitian, and replaced him with Trajan. They would have left out Caligula. And you can see that one of the things that this lineup is doing is asking you precisely to think about how you rank. How do you rank vice and how do you rank virtue? That's, once you've got 12, that's what you're asking about.
That's a wonderful wrap up. And we thank you very much for this talk.